If you enjoy great food and memorable dining experiences, then you're going to love this episode of Life Excellence. And even if you're not a foodie, today's conversation is really about people, connection, and hospitality, regardless of the business you're in. After opening 50 restaurants over the last 30 years, James Beard winning restaurateur Kevin Boehm has become one of the world's foremost visionaries in the field of hospitality. Kevin has built a restaurant group based on great chefs, inspired design, and enlightened hospitality. Born in Springfield, Illinois, Kevin told his mother at age 10 that he wanted to open a restaurant someday. That day would come in 1993 when Kevin opened a six-table restaurant in Seaside, Florida. By age 30, he had already opened and sold four restaurants. In 2002, Kevin partnered with Rob Katz to form what would become Boka Restaurant Group. Together, they've opened more than 40 restaurants, earning 20 James Beard nominations and 13 consecutive Michelin stars. In 2019, Kevin and Rob won the coveted Outstanding Restaurateur in America at the James Beard Awards. Kevin is also the author of The Bottomless Cup, a deeply personal memoir about hospitality, humanity, and the idea that when you create a place where others feel cared for, you often discover who you are in the process. I've really been looking forward to this conversation, and I'm excited and honored to have him with us today. Welcome, Kevin, and thanks for joining us on Life Excellence.
Brian, thank you so much for that kind introduction.
Oh, of course, Kevin. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Kevin, the restaurant business has a reputation for being one of the hardest ways in the world to make a living. Huge upfront costs to get started, razor thin margins. I don't have to tell you, constant staffing challenges, demanding guests, and competition around every corner. Knowing all that, what inspired you to open your first restaurant? And what still excites you enough to continue doing it after 30 years, which is just remarkable?
They didn't get that reputation by accident. I live right next door to Mr. Beef, which was the entire basis of the show, The Bear. And I know so many people in this industry that have trouble watching that show because it is so nerve-wracking and so true that it makes them feel like they're working in it and living it again, and they feel that stress. But for me, I got this amazing level of accomplishment when I had any level of success in this business because it is so difficult. So as a kid who was wrestling with a lot of issues when I was very young, I liked the idea that I went in every night and I was kind of trying to land the plane. And like right before I crashed it, I pulled the nose up. It was like the restaurant version of almost like cutting yourself. I was this bipolar kid who was looking for dopamine injection wherever he could find it. And the restaurant business in that chaos was the perfect place for me to find it.
Well, you've certainly gotten it. And the number of successful restaurants you've been a part of is astounding. At one point, and I hope I have these numbers right, you opened 13 restaurants in 7 years. And in another stretch, you opened seven restaurants in 18 months. Now, Kevin, you know how difficult it is to open and manage just one restaurant. And yet, Boka Group operates at a remarkably high level across diverse concepts in multiple cities. What does it take to grow at that level while still delivering the kind of hospitality you value so highly?
Well, that's a great question. We opened a restaurant called Girl and the Goat in 2010, and at the time was by far the most successful restaurant I had ever opened. We were four restaurants at that point, and then we went on a run where we opened seven in 3 years. And our corporate office at that point was myself, my partner Rob Katz, and a gentleman named Ian Goldberg, who became our COO. And the three of us were trying to build this plane as we were flying it. And in a lot of ways, we were successful, but it was also a disaster. We were killing ourselves personally while we were building ourselves up professionally. And we learned real quickly that if we continued that pace without enough infrastructure, at some point we were going to run out of gas or someone was going to have a heart attack. And that's when we started to build up this incredible team. And so the easy answer to that question, how do you do it? You do it with a great team of people who buy into it the same way that you do, who love it, um, and hopefully are smarter than you are. We that was one of the keys is Rob and I finding all these little areas within our company and then finding the best possible people for each of those areas. Because there's very few people in life, no matter what industry they're in, whether you're president of the United States or president of a restaurant company, that are good at everything. That's why a general is called a general, because they have a general knowledge of everything. And Rob and I had gotten to a point where we had done everything. And then we just started looking for people who were the masters of those specific areas. For instance, a woman named Julie Rue, who's the president of our business strategy, she didn't even work in the restaurant business. She worked for Microsoft for a decade. But we figured she was the best person for that specific area in our bespoke company. So we got very good at finding the right talent for the right spot. And I looked at it like, in the movie when they're putting the heist team together, that's kind of how I felt about putting our company together. I was like, okay, who's the best safe cracker? You know what? This Jamie Madonia girl seems pretty freaking good at it. And she became our CFO. And okay, who's the getaway car driver? And so that's kind of what we did after that first stretch of 7 was put this crazy heist team together, almost all of which are still with the company.
Well, and that's one of the characteristics of great leadership is hiring great people who, even if you can do those things, you can't do everything, right? You have so many restaurants and they're in different cities. You can't be more than one place at once. But hiring people who are either better than you or are great in particular areas. And then I always say, get out of their way so they can do the thing that you hired them to do. I mean, that's the other part is
A
giving
hundred,
them
100%.
yeah, giving them the autonomy and just and you do this creatively, right, with chefs that you hire and partner with, but even in other areas, not looking over their shoulder because you've brought them in because they're strong in a particular area, and so you get out of their way and let them do what you've brought them in to do.
Yeah, it comes with a lot of, you have to have a lot of self-awareness though, to know which areas your specific DNA should still have its fingerprints on, and what are the things that you should give away. I've always looked at the restaurant business as, identify the problem, solve the problem, teach the solution. And as those problems got bigger, as we got bigger, it was doing that. And then as someone took over that problem, they might find a better solution for it. And we're a much more sophisticated company than we were 5 years ago, let alone 15 years ago when we opened up Girl and the Goat. And so you look at the old days, and it's really interesting the things that you kept and the things that you've given away. And so there are still things that I wrap my arms around because I think it's important that I still do them.
Sure. Kevin, I've had the pleasure of dining in 3 of your restaurants, all in Chicago, where our oldest son lives. You mentioned Girl and the Goat. I've been there, and I've been to Swift and Sons, and then most recently to Swift Tavern when Michigan played Northwestern at Wrigley Field. We had
Yes.
brunch right across the street, and that was terrific. And all 3 of those were great experiences. And I wonder at a basic level, what is the experience you strive to create for your guests?
You know, First of all, we do a lot of different restaurants. I have Michelin starred restaurants. I have a diner. I have a rooftop deck. I have a steakhouse. I have a Japanese restaurant. We do all different levels of service, from the finest of dining to the very casual. And I think it just starts with humanity. It's hard to teach a good person to be a good person. And so every interview I think that I've ever done in the last at least 15 years, I've opened with the question, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Because I just want to get them talking and hear who they are as a human being, not a planned question. And within that, I try to figure out, do I like them and do I think they're smart? And if you can find somebody that you like that is smart and has a good emotional IQ, I can run a restaurant with you because teaching you how to hold a plate, teaching you to serve somebody from the left side with your left hand so you keep your body open to them, those are rules. That's service. Hospitality is the way you make somebody feel. It's said in our business, service is black and white, hospitality is color. We can teach that black and white pretty fast. It's hard for me to teach the color. So I try to learn that before we open up a restaurant, get a group of people together. And I think that's, the symmetry in all our places is that we have good human beings working in the front of it. But it really is great hospitality, great food, which we do by having chef partners in every single restaurant who are taking ownership of that food, incredible, innovative design that makes people feel good inside of it, and then an underlying sense of financial responsibility. And if you could put those four together, then you can have a successful restaurant. You could have checked two boxes in the 80s and 90s and still succeeded. These days, it's tough without checking all four.
Sure. And I know, and you have, I think I read 2,000 people on your team. So very
Yeah, it's over
large
more over
organization.
3,000 now.
3,000 now, so
Yeah,
that's stated. Lots of people, and you mentioned hiring for humanity, but I I was gonna say I'm guessing, but I actually know this. I talked to somebody who knows you a little bit and knows a little bit about the, Boka Restaurant Group, and the thing that he said was he remarked about the culture of Boca, and he said, no matter who I'm speaking with, whether it's I don't know all the jobs in a restaurant, but
sure.
the entry level job to a chef in the restaurant to somebody in corporate, that there is this cultural synchronicity that exists within your organization. And so, how do you hire for culture, or is that something that evolves over time? I know a lot of your people have been with you for a long time. They've started out maybe at entry level, and who knows what they're doing now, probably running some of your concepts. How do you hire for culture?
You know, life's a lot of pulling levers, isn't it, Brian? Like you say, let's see what happens if I do this. And, I'm 33 years in as an owner now. And I've had moments in my life where I go, hey, let's hire somebody from this company and see what happens. Or let's hire somebody based on this resume that's, 25 places strong and they have so much experience. And most of the time, when we've hired someone just based on experience, we've lost. Who does well in our company have been the people who've grown up in it, um, or someone who specifically chose our company for the culture. And so I've still had a lot of success with people coming to our company who've worked for a long time and said, I chose you because of this ethos specifically in your company. We've done well there too. So I think it's just something that has to be important to you. It's part of our guiding principles to hire people who ask a question with a question mark, not a period. you know, Someone who's actually concerned about the people that they're dealing with. And so our interview style might be a little bit different than somebody else because we're really trying to find out who they are as humans. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Rob and I really take quality of life um, as a big priority, and we spend a lot of time with these people. And so I would rather spend time with, soulful people doing soulful projects, especially at this point in my life. And so when people say it's not personal, it's business, I instantly know that's somebody I don't want to do business with because everything's personal. And so I think most of the things I do, there's some sort of personal edge to it, and I think that's benefited the company
I eat out a fair amount, and I know that in restaurants, things don't always happen the way the restaurant owner wants them to happen, the way the server wants them to happen, the way the chef wants them to happen, and certainly not the way customers want them to happen. Now, I wasn't describing any of your restaurants, but I've noticed that in other places. Um, Obviously, things go wrong, and it's
all the time.
fascinating. It's fascinating to see, and this isn't just true of restaurants. It's true in life. Things go wrong, and we know that things are going to go wrong. And I always think that the important thing isn't the event, it's what happens after the event. So, in other words, how people respond to that. So, how customer responds to that, how the server responds to that, how the manager responds to that. Kevin, you've hosted everyone from well-known figures like Mick Jagger and Barack Obama to business leaders to families celebrating milestones, which is a very special occasion, maybe family that doesn't eat out often, but they're celebrating a special birthday or maybe an anniversary, to loyal customers and of course lots of people visiting for the very first time. I wonder, across that whole spectrum, who's the hardest guest to please?
Hmm. God, that's a really interesting question. Like, I serve 3.5 million people dinner a year. I think the hardest guest to please is the one who walks in the door and already wants to be upset.
Mm.
There is that person. There is that type of person. And I was always the person that in the early days who got sent in when somebody was upset. And I had a tried and true approach to it. I go, tell me everything that happened. Why is position two at table 31 upset? I'd gather all the information I possibly could. Then I would go to the table and I would say, I've been briefed on what happened, but I'd really like to hear it from you because I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. And them talking about it would actually de-escalate them. I would active listen while they were talking about it so they knew that I was hearing them. And then at the end of it, I would do something. I would say, listen, we screwed up tonight, and here's what I'd like to do for you. I'd like to buy your dinner this evening. I'd also like to give you my contact so the next time you come in, you talk to me directly. And pretty much, I could sniff out that person who just wanted to be angry. Um, because in almost every case, and I talked to the head FBI negotiator one time, it's the same way that he would handle a hostage situation. And he was like, God, I think you could do my job. And at the end of that, if a guy's just like, that's not enough, and he just wants to be angry, then I'll let somebody be angry. But that is a specific type of human. Every once in a while, I'm going to encounter somebody like that who's angry about something else in life, and I'm going to handle the projection. And I can take it. I was always that person who could take that hit, and I would apologize and I would move on. But honestly, when you're dealing with people who are a very high level, usually the highest level, those were the people that were really incredible and true gentlemen, like the president of the United States. I mean, Obama couldn't have been more generous with his time and wonderful when I spent time with him. So,
Do you train your staff for those kinds of scenarios? Not necessarily the one where the person can't be pleased, but just that things aren't always going to go perfectly, and how to respond to that, or is that just a superpower that restaurant staff has, the ability
no,
to think on their feet and diffuse situations that go sideways?
yeah, I'm a big believer in rehearsal in life, not just in restaurants. And so when we do mock service, and it could be anything from the host stand to the dining room floor, we rehearse all those situations. Like, I tell a story of my buddy who was in a play on Broadway, and it was a play about a basketball game and a guy who'd bet on the game. And at the end of the play, he makes a 12-foot jump shot and they win. And it's like a real basketball game. And Philip Seymour Hoffman was at my buddy's play, and he waited till he came outside stage and said, "What happens if you miss it?" And he goes, "It's a different play. We have a different ending." And when he told me that story, I was like, that's what I do. Like the two women at table 33 might have the greatest meal of their lives. They might catch their hair on fire on the candle. I've had that happen before. I know what I'm going to do in both areas. So when we go through an opening, we do phone mock service where a guest is asking a question and see what they say. What happens if a woman trips? What happens if they tell us they have an allergy and we still send it to them? I mean, we go through all these scenarios. And so we're all about rehearsal all the time, because I do truly believe that the way to really make a guest into a customer who comes all the time is handling a problem with grace. and with elegance and with that soigné. And so when I look at those things that happen, it sounds super cliche and like I'm making it up. I really do look at them as an opportunity, as long as they're not too awful, where I can sweep in and say, hey, we're going to make this right and we're going to rally right now. We're good at rallying. We have enough things in our arsenal when something goes wrong that I can make their dinner really special.
Can you share a particular occasion if one comes to mind? I mean, you mentioned the woman whose hair caught on fire. I guess you could do that one, but if
Yeah.
there's another one that comes to mind that could have turned into a disaster or was going sideways, but was averted by your providing what our friend Will Gadara calls unreasonable hospitality.
No, that's exactly, I remember very early on in the Boca days, we had a table for 10 who was 40 minutes late, and they were followed up by another table for 10 who was going to come on the heels of them. And then by the time we got the first table down, they sat long. So I'm at about an hour, 10 minutes on the second table, and they're at the bar. Um, and we're fully angry. I'd run out of moves that I could do with placating them with free drinks. And I built a 10 top in the restaurant that didn't exist. And one of the things that I had to do was no longer use the bathrooms that were downstairs. So I had to close that door and tape off the back so nobody would come up through the back and come through that door. And I had one old table and a table we had to build downstairs. And I remember like I had to take my suit off and I'm screwing tables together and we're putting upstairs. And we built a 10 top on the fly, and they saw the effort that we were putting into it. And I went with honesty. I said, the table ahead of you, we're 45 minutes late, and they're taking their time. I'm going to build a table for you right now, and I'm going to make something happen. Um, and then we just went for it on their table. I go, guys, we're going to descend on this table to the point at the end of that meal, it was their birthday, and we had two opera singers who worked in the restaurant, and we had them sing happy birthday in opera.
Oh wow.
And I know people still to this day that were at that table who were still great customers. And will always say when I run into the restaurant, they go like, Kevin built a table to accommodate us one night. And so you do what you have to do. I think, it's a combination of elbow grease and ideation and thinking in the moment and trying to not let them see you sweat if possible. And you can build some pretty special moments for people.
That's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing it. And I think it really transcends industries, right? That's not about the restaurant business. It's about adversity and how we respond to adversity with customers. And that's great insight. You certainly had to think on your feet. I mean, it's one thing to do a two top right at the entrance next to the hostess stand, quite another to do a 10 top. Kevin, you've been in the business a long time, obviously, certainly long enough to see restaurants open and close, even really good ones. And yet, Boka Group has continued to grow and thrive for more than 2 decades. What's your secret sauce? What do you, and you've talked about some of it, but what do you, Rob, your chefs, and your team do differently that's enabled Boka Group to not just succeed, because there are lots of restaurants that succeed for a season, but to endure the test of time, which is so difficult to achieve, as you know?
Well, I'll start off with an analogy. Old quarterbacks in the National Football League do really well because if they can keep their bodies together, the game slows down. So you can go back to the 1960s, from Johnny Unitas to Jim Plunkett in the 80s to Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford, who at 38 went to the Final Four teams this year. If they can keep their bodies together, the game slows down and they kind of know what's happening and they can navigate the NFL better. The key to life is staying interested. By the time you get to your, 25 years in a company, in theory, you should be better. That doesn't happen very often because people get complacent, they get lazy, and they get bored. So what we always talk about is how do we stay interested? I've watched it with also with Let Us Entertain You, a company that's been around since 1971, who still doing innovative restaurants and have a lot of respect for what they do. And for us, it's keeping people in our circle that are still excited to come to work each day and want to sit at that brainstorming meeting and ideate about what we do next. We very rarely repeat the same concept because we want to stay interested and it's just not that exciting to us. So we're both artists and businessmen. And I think that's kept us young. And so we're still thinking of way out of the box ideas when we come in and do a new concept. And I think it keeps us excited. So when we opened up our steakhouse 10 years ago that you went to, one of the things we did was we had a board that said core competencies and the bend. Core competencies are what do you have to be a steakhouse? You have to have a Caesar salad, three kinds of potatoes. You have to have a big steak selection. You have to have shrimp cocktail. The other side was let's have a chocolate trolley that we roll out at the end of the night. Let's have a beef Wellington cart. Let's have a concierge desk up front that somebody can get a list of jazz clubs or just a Tide whiteout. Let's have a magician on the floor who will do 20 minutes at your table for $60 and let's put it on the menu. And so still being creative and still being artists and still drawing weird pictures this many years into my career, that's what keeps me interested. And I think that's one of our special sauces, if not the one.
I love that being interested and sort of related to that is curiosity. That's a trait that I think is a wonderful trait to have that keeps you young and vibrant and full of energy. And being interested is certainly one of those great traits as well. As you know, Kevin, our show is called Life Excellence, and I'm curious, what does excellence mean to you?
Excellence means to me trying really hard. I love watching people try hard at every level, from an apprenticeship to, you know, when I got to have a cameo role in The Bear, I got to watch Olivia Colman act. And I was like, that's amazing. I love seeing talented people work really hard. Um, and so everybody has excellence inside them. They just got to find it. They got to find out. You said superpower before, find out what their superpower is. I love watching people work hard. And it's the only way that excellence comes out to me. I don't think you can half ass it and be excellent. You have to be, um, you know, nervous enough that you're thinking about what you're doing, but confident enough to pull it off. And that's kind of where excellence falls.
Yeah. I was gonna say confident enough to go for it anyway, like in
Yeah,
spite of
that's right.
that hesitation, that reservation, that nervousness, and just not be I have goosebumps as I'm saying this, just not being 100% sure, being far from 100% sure that you can pull it off, and yet going for it anyway.
No, that's 100% true. And I've watched plenty of very smart, brilliant people who mail it in still, who have done it so many times that they're just going through the rep and it's sort of automatic. And that doesn't speak excellence to me. I can tell when somebody's mailing it in.
Totally agree. Kevin, your book, The Bottomless Cup, a memoir of secrets, restaurants, and forgiveness, was published late last year. I read it right after it came out, and I have to tell you, your story was unexpected, revealing, and frankly, far more raw than I thought it was going to be. You're a gifted writer, too. I was captivated in the first few pages of the prologue. And when I read the first sentence of the book in chapter one, Kevin, I'm not kidding. My heart stopped for a second. And the book, and highly recommend the book, by the way, for lots of reasons. If you're a
Thank you.
foodie, it's great. We'll talk about some of the other reasons it's great, but the book is a brutally honest, in my synopsis of a brutally honest and vulnerable account of the highs and lows of your turbulent life growing up, struggles with mental health, both personally and in your family, in your wild, crazy, and incredibly successful career in the restaurant business, which you describe, and I quote this, I think it was brilliant the way you described it. The magic of hospitality and the thrill of a dining room on the edge of chaos. And I think you actually alluded to that earlier. Why was it so important for you to share your story? And why now at this stage in your life and your career?
Yeah, there was a moment after I hit rock bottom, which I talked about in the book, where I felt a little bit like a fraud. For the first time, I was telling a therapist, all these secrets that I had kept my whole life. And all of a sudden, I started becoming the authentic me, and I was tired of playing a part that I'd played for a long time. And so I was like, I don't want to play this avatar anymore. And I thought the quickest way to dispel who I pretended to be for such a long time was to write about it. And I just happened, a book agent had seen something I'd written in Esquire, and I ended up getting a book deal. And as I wrote it, I just wanted it to be out there because I just wanted to start being myself. So my number one goal with that book was to strip all the coats of varnish off all the stories I'd always told and really tell the truth.
Who did you write the book for? I got the sense as I was reading it that maybe you wrote it for yourself. You mentioned
Hmm.
therapy, almost as a form of therapy.
I wrote it. I wrote it for myself for sure. It was a meditation every single morning, and it was therapy. But I also wrote it for the amount of people in this life who live life as an avatar and are really a sad person behind that. And I knew a number of those people. And as soon as I cracked the door open a little bit and told people what was going on with me, there's not a day that goes by since I put this book out that I've not gotten between 5 and 10 emails or texts of people who had a life just exactly like me. And I found out some things after I put the book out, because I didn't know a lot about my father's side of the family. And I found out that my grandmother committed suicide, my aunt committed suicide. I knew my mom was bipolar and her mom was bipolar. And so it's kind of like if you're in a car with a bunch of people who have the measles, you're probably going to get the measles. I was in a family tree that all had a lot of mental issues. And, I learned to navigate it, but behind the scenes, I was a very sad person a lot of times. And as soon as I figured it out through a lot of work and medication and therapy and all that sort of stuff, and I found my way to a happy life, it almost felt like a responsibility to tell the people that were having the same, things happening to them that were happening to me, that there's a better way to do it. And if you think you're going to outsmart it, you're wrong. And so, I don't have very many regrets in life, but when I got medicated and after I'd had 3 really great months of therapy and had gone to Hoffman and done ayahuasca, and I started to feel how I feel right now, I was like, you dumb SOB. You could have done this a long time ago. And so yeah, I hurt for the former me that I had to go through a lot of that and wasn't able to grab some low hanging fruit.
Well, I give you credit for getting to where you are today, and I hope you're not beating yourself too much about
I'm not.
how long it took to get there. You have to give yourself grace too, and
Yeah.
I'm happy you are where you are today, and I certainly hope that anyone who's going through or has been through anything close to what you've gone through will read the book, because I think for lots of reasons, but I think it could be incredibly helpful for people to know that they're not alone in your struggles, and I know that you want that for people. What advice do you have for someone who might be struggling right now, either with mental health, but it could be relationship challenges or even just trying to figure out their purpose in life? And what do you hope people will take away from the book?
Yeah. Step one, get a therapist. And if you're already seeing a therapist and it's not working, get another one. So first of all, your relationship with your therapist is like no other relationship you're ever going to have in life because they're not there to like you. They're there to help you. So it should be the most honest relationship that you've ever had, and you should just lay it all out there. And therapists are a lot like spouses and mates. It takes a few to find the right one. So if it's not working, choose another one. Um, and I hope out of the book, what they'll find is that the development of yourself as a human is a lot more important than blind ambition towards building something in your world. Ambition can be great, but you really do need a foundation first of a human being who feels like he's part of the ride. You know, I never was in the moment with what the stuff that I was doing, not most of the time. And so I missed out on a lot of those beautiful moments. So sometimes you need to take a step back and say, I'm going to work on myself as a human and then maybe go back to this. You know, the work can wait sometimes.
What was the catalyst that changed things for you?
Well, I almost took my own life. I was stood on a ledge in Los Angeles and was ready to pack it all in. And, fortunately, my phone rang that night and stopped that process. And when I came out of that room, it was an easy bargain for me to say, wait a second, if the alternative is death, what am I so worried about these other things for? So let me write down the 20 things that I know I need to do right now to get myself right. And that was for the first time in my life, I took some time off of work just to concentrate on myself. There were a bunch of really hard things on that list. It was don't walk a dining room for a few months. You're going to stop drinking. You're going to get therapy 5 days a week. You're going to get medicated. Like all these massive changes in my life. Um, and I was literally seconds from taking my own life, and rock bottom is a gift if you can survive it. Most people don't. And I was able to survive it that night and I took full advantage of it. So I'm grateful and lucky there.
Well, and I'm certainly happy that you're here to talk about it. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are very close to you who share that sentiment. Can you give us a sense? When was that time wise? Where was that in your
Yeah,
life?
it was 5 years ago.
Okay. So,
Not quite 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago.
yeah, fairly recent.
Yeah.
I mentioned that you were a gifted writer, and I just loved reading your style of writing,
Well,
and it was
thanks.
so descriptive and powerful in some of the ways in many of the ways you describe things. And you wrote in your book that your search for happiness has been like a 50-year treasure hunt, and that you were successful in every way but the way that counted. And I wondered, and I'll ask you, what does the success that eluded you for so long look like? And do you feel today like you've arrived at the place you would describe as happy or successful or content? I wonder how you describe that.
Yeah, I have three pillars in life. One is, do I wake up with purpose every morning? And is the reason behind that purpose a noble one? It's not for revenge and it's not for ego or capitalism. It's because I love it. Two, do I run into the people that I like, love, and respect while I'm doing that purpose? And then three, if I'm the protagonist in my own movie and I'm watching that movie, am I rooting for myself? And am I okay showing the full edit to, to other people? Am I okay showing all the footage? Am I proud of everything that I'm doing in life? And if those three things are intact, then I'm intact. And that's kind of how I measure myself these days. Um, and so I was always pretty lucky with number two that I had people around me that I liked and loved. But, I never woke up with peace and I never went to bed with peace. And now I have both.
Mm. What was the shift that you needed to make to get to that point? I mean, I know you mentioned being in LA, and that was certainly the turning point. But you had to do a lot of work after that to get to the place that you just described.
Yeah, I think that I subscribe to Simon Sinek's infinite game these days. That, finite games are baseball. Life, love, marriage, work is an infinite game, and you just try to get a little bit better every single day. And so I slowed down my thinking process. I don't sprint towards anything anymore. I try to get a little bit better every single day. And my relationship with myself um, is probably paramount before everything else, because if I can love myself, and then I'm very good at loving other people. And so I have on the notes section of my phone, I have the list of all the people that I love that I know love me. And when I need centered, that's the list I look at. I don't look at how many restaurants I have or what my bank account looks like. And so I think it was just a shift in thinking about who I was and what was important about me. And it wasn't telling somebody my resume within 5 minutes of meeting them. It was who I was as a person.
Boy, that list is a powerful takeaway, um, for me. What a great thing to have to refer back to. And because what happens, I think, I don't, I'll have to think about this a little, ponder this a little bit, but I think when you go back to that list, it's pretty hard to continue the despair that you were in that caused you to look at the list, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's
that's
sort of
right.
like you can't hold gratitude and anything else at the same time. And so I think for me, as I'm thinking through who that list is for me, that would take me back to a place of extreme gratitude, and again, just make everything else. I think everything else pale by comparison.
That's right. That's right.
You've experienced a lot, both personally and professionally. As you look back, what are you most grateful for?
Oh man, I'm great. You know what? I'm grateful for it all. Um, I'm the sum of everything and everyone that I've ever encountered, and I'm so happy with me at 55 that I'm happy that all that stuff happened. And it's a great story. I can look back on it now, all the versions of myself, the ones I liked and the ones I didn't, and know they all had to happen to get to here. And so there are some highlights along the way. Most of it's people that I encountered, from, uh, you know, from an English teacher who told me that I was a good writer for the first time, um, to the people I worked at the first restaurant I worked at, to having a loving sister who made a tough childhood better, um, to my three beautiful children. I'm grateful for all these people along the way that kept me upright, kept me alive.
I love your description of being the sum total of your collective experiences. And if you didn't say it like that, those are words that I've used before.
Yes,
And we could probably sit and compare stories, and not to compare stories, but we all have stuff, right? And I've always maintained that I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I hadn't gone through all the stuff, like the great stuff, but the crappy stuff too, right? And you wouldn't be either. None of us would be. So I love that concept, and I think that's a great way to bring things to a close. That we're the sum of our collective experiences. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I'm very grateful for our time together today.
no, grateful for you having me, and letting me talk about these important issues and all the important things that are inside the book, and talking about life excellence.
Well, thanks again for being here. It's great. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Kevin, thanks for tuning into Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with others, posting about today's show with Kevin Boehm on social media, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at brianbartes.com. Until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.